Butch Casey was behaving strangely. His mood had turned dark in the month leading up to his violent murder in June of 1994 in South Florida. He seemed to sense he was in danger. He spoke of machine guns, of battling mobsters. And after he's beaten and gunned down on his dining room floor, along with 2 women he had invited to his house for drinks after they closed his nightclub, Casey's Nickelodeon, friends and family tell police of his recent depression. He's anxious, they say, about the arrest of one of his longtime friends on murder charges. And it's that last revelation that sends detectives and the media on an intriguing and unexpected tangent in the early days of the investigation. His friend is O.J. Simpson. From the Sun Sentinel and SouthFlorida.com, in association with Wondery, this is Felonious Florida, the podcast that leads you into the dark side of the Sunshine State. I'm Lisa Arthur, and this is the story of the Casey's Nickelodeon murders. Episode 2, O.J. and the Mob. In the 1970s, long before the Casey's Nickelodeon bar in South Florida opened, Butch Casey's parents, Pappy and Dottie Sukarski, ran a bar with the same name in Buffalo, New York, where Butch had grown up. He managed the bar for his parents, and as the club's popularity grew, so did Butch's reputation as the Disco King. Casey's became a hangout spot for members of the Buffalo Bills football team. During the 1973 season, the Bills had finally started to see the payoff for their 1969 draft pick, O.J. Simpson. The running back had a breakout year, setting records and earning the league's title of Most Valuable Player. Casey's Nickelodeon became a regular hangout for O.J., and he developed a friendship with Butch Casey. In 1980, Butch's family sold Casey's and moved to South Florida. But Butch and O.J. remained friends. On June 12, 1994, O.J.'s wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ronald Goldman were violently murdered in Los Angeles. O.J. Simpson was a prime suspect. During the 2 weeks between those murders and his own death, Butch was agitated by the situation and concerned for his friend O.J. But even before that, for almost a full month, Butch had been unusually dark and melancholy at times, according to friends and relatives police interviewed. In the month before he died, Butch had started saying things to people close to him like, "If anything happens to me, you're taken care of in my estate. If anything happens to me, Ray's gonna run the bar." The jovial and brash Butch Casey seemed suddenly reflective. He asked one longtime friend, "I'm not a bad person, am I?" Police looking into Butch's murder wanted to know more about this change in Butch's state of mind. Paul Manzello was the lead detective for the Miramar, Florida Police Department. He questioned a manager from Butch's bar, Peter Bednarz.
He may have not been unaware of the fact that he had contact with very close friends of his and family members, indicating or giving a sense that he felt something was going to happen to him. When he was speaking of the O.J. Simpson incident, did he infer any indication to you that he may be in trouble at this point for anything?
It would be conjecture on my part, but he did seem aggravated about the O.J. incident. But as you know, somebody that was good friends with somebody, I would assume that he would be concerned about his old friend, because Butch was very loyal and would do anything for people that he had been friends with, that had been loyal to him.
5 days after the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, O.J. Simpson led police on a chase through Los Angeles, the infamous White Bronco chase. He was arrested June 17th. 1 week later, Butch Casey is beaten and shot to death in his South Florida home along with his 2 guests, Marie Rogers and Sharon Anderson. Police discovered that, shortly before he died, Butch had told people at his bar that he was going to be bigger news than O.J. Simpson. Was there some kind of connection? The conspiracy theory caught the media's attention in 1994. Margie Lambert was a reporter at the time for the South Florida Sun Sentinel.
We were hearing from people who knew him or people who spent time at the Nickelodeon, his bar, that he knew O.J. Simpson and maybe there was an O.J. Simpson connection and maybe it was a big conspiracy and he was part of it. So we checked out the O.J. Simpson connection and also that helped us do some background on what he had done before he'd been in Florida, and he had been the manager of a bar also called Casey's Nickelodeon in Buffalo, New York at the time that O.J. was playing for the Bills, and it was a bar where Simpson hung out and they had some mutual friends, and I think Sukarski at one point got caught up in a police sting that was intended, that was targeting O.J. Simpson. So we included all that, but we were kind of getting a lot of rumors from people who knew him. You know, you better look into this conspiracy. This might not have anything to do with him. It might have to do with O.J. Simpson. In the end, of course, it didn't. But that was after the white Bronco chase, and so O.J. Simpson was what everybody was talking about. So it was easy to want to pursue that and see if it led anywhere.
The sting she's talking about added fuel to the speculation. It was aimed at O.J. Simpson back in the days of the Buffalo, New York Casey's Nickelodeon, but Butch got wrapped up in it. Police at the time suspected somebody had been supplying cocaine to members of the Bills football team. When police raided the place Butch was staying with a friend, they found 2 guns and small amounts of cocaine and marijuana. Butch told the cops all of it was his.
Tucharski was an interesting character. He was a real party guy. He had some minor arrests for drugs and other violations, both here and in Buffalo. And I remember that the guy who bought the bar from him in Buffalo, he talked about him as being a kind of impresario. He was the one who knew everything and kind of got everything going at the bar, and he was just the party king, flamboyant, had an eye for the ladies, just kind of lived on the edge.
Despite the public intrigue, police investigating the Casey's murder quickly ruled out a connection to O.J. Simpson or to Butch's life in Buffalo. But there may be more hope for a break closer to home, a lead they were keeping from the public. At least one witness saw 2 men leave Butch Casey's home on the morning he was murdered, and they drove off in his luxury Mercedes. Planning a wedding should be less stressful and more enjoyable. Hi, this is Lisa Arthur. Zola is reinventing the wedding registry and planning process to make the happiest moment in couples' lives even happier. Whether you're a couple or a guest, you'll appreciate how easy and enjoyable it is to use Zola. Zola's registry has everything you love about your favorite department store, plus things like honeymoon funds, fitness classes, wine subscriptions, and so much more. It's so easy to navigate the shop, search for items, and complete a purchase for the happy couple. You'll especially like the unique group gifting feature that lets multiple guests contribute to big-ticket gifts. You'll be thrilled with Zola's friendly customer service that goes above and beyond. Plus, there's price matching and free shipping every day. To make your experience even easier, couples can manage their registries on the go through Zola's top-rated app for iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch. And Zola has a free suite of wedding planning tools, including free wedding websites to give your celebration a customized and sophisticated look. To sign up with Zola and receive a $50 credit toward your registry, go to zola.com/Florida. That's ZOLA.com/Florida. Join more than 500,000 couples who have used Zola. Go to ZOLA.com/Florida. In Miramar, Florida, police are still studying tapes from surveillance cameras that captured the killings in Butch Casey's home. The recording shows the intruders escaping out of the house after executing Butch, Sharon, and Marie. Gary Foy lives on East Shore Drive, a few houses up from Butch Casey. It's the morning of June 24th, and Foy is heading out to a bowling tournament. It's sometime after 7 o'clock. As he rolls toward the Casey house, Butch's black Mercedes-Benz convertible is backing out of the driveway. The top to the Mercedes is down, and Foy sees 2 young men in the front seats. The driver pauses to let Foy pass, then pulls in behind him on the road. It's odd, he thinks, that Butch would let 2 young guys drive his expensive car. Later, he described the men to police.
One of them had a long-haired driver, but didn't look that long. I really couldn't see because of the backrest, I could, the backrest behind his head. I know he had black hair, and that he was a white male. And on the passenger, he had short hair and like a scruffy face, and he had, real short hair in the back, sort of like a semi-crew cut or whatnot. And he had black hair, and he was a white male. I didn't really, try to consciously really look at them. That's what I saw when I went by.
Gary Foy has no idea that the men driving behind him had likely just killed 3 people in his neighborhood. But as he watches them, he is struck by their odd behavior. They're goofing around and acting childish.
You notice anything peculiar of what they may have been doing or
I thought it was really funny because they were playing with the windows up and down and the mirrors and there was like a T-top on the car. It was a convertible, but it had a metal hoop, it was artistically done, not just metal, but a metal partition like in the middle, like a support for the roof. And they were trying it at different angles and trying to get it down, and I saw them turn on and off the lights, and I could hear them turning up the volume real loud and switching stations and turning it down. And, I thought it was really strange, that they were playing with the car in this manner.
Police had their first witness. They may be one step closer to figuring out who murdered Butch Casey, Sharon Anderson, and Marie Rogers. In Birmingham, Alabama, Deb Bowie is awaiting word on her missing sister, Sharon Anderson, who hadn't been seen since Saturday night. It's Monday morning. Deb is 9 months pregnant, and she can't stop thinking about how excited Sharon is to be an aunt. Deb's husband takes a call from her mother, Barbara. Sharon has been shot in Florida, he learns, and he has to break the news to Deb.
It was just a bunch of yes-no answers. Yes, no, Okay. I don't even know why the first thing out of my mouth was, is she dead? But it just came out of my mouth, is she dead? And I said it, not really expecting an answer. And he said, she is. And I just lost it. I just went into the emergency room and collapsed. And my daughter was born 3 days later. That day was nothing like it was supposed to be. I can't really ever fully articulate what that's like to have a brand new baby in the middle of that.
Deb is also robbed of the chance to say goodbye to Sharon at her funeral.
They kept me at the hospital. I was released on Saturday, which was the day of my sister's funeral. So I didn't go. At that time, we knew nothing. I didn't know who the girl was that she was with. I did not know whose house she was at. And I just could not wrap my mind around who would kill her.
Deb Bowie and Sharon Anderson were extremely tight sisters, more like twins. They were born just 11 months apart.
My parents divorced when we were really young, like 2 and 3 years old. And my mom eventually, she remarried a guy in Miami who was actually pretty abusive. And so my sister and I were close anyway, but I definitely think being in that environment where you're raised kind of in this abusive household, it causes whatever that, for us, we were probably much closer than a lot of other siblings just because it was sort of, me and her against the wall forever.
The sisters had very few other relatives in their lives to lean on, certainly not the family of their mother. Barbara Jones was a white Jewish woman who had been disowned by her family when she married Deb and Sharon's father, a black man who wasn't Jewish. When Deb left for college in 1988, it was the first time the sisters' paths diverged. Sharon started to chase her dream, and Deb got a kick out of watching from afar.
So we were pretty close in age, and, we had always gone to the same schools. We pretty much had the same clique of friends until about high school. She graduated in 87, and so she moved out, and I graduated in 88. And that was the first time when I think we kind of hit that fork in the road. I graduated and I left because I didn't want to be in South Florida anymore and moved. I went to New Orleans. She remained. And that was the first time really in our lives that we were completely separated, like physically separated. She sort of went through this soul-searching period. That's the only way I can think to describe it. She was no longer in the house with my mom and her husband, and she moved into her own place. She kind of got into, being healthy, working out a lot, really kind of being thoughtful about what she wanted to do with her life. So this would have been in the 90s, early 90s. And I remember Miami was going through a big change then. Like, South Beach was just forming. So she would call me and tell me about all these great things going on in South Beach and a lot of the older hotels. Because we used to stay in all of those hotels when we were growing up. Because my stepfather used to just beat the crap out of my mom. And we stayed in every single hotel, it seems, on South Beach. Well, that was like in the 80s when it wasn't really such a hot place. So she would call and say, it's really changing and there's a lot going on. And she had gotten into these model calls. Because back then they were doing a lot of music videos on South Beach, and they had some of these open model calls. So she would, have these like 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning. We had very different lives, but it was fun to talk to her because I'm in school and she's doing the music video scene, and so we would get on, the phone and just talk for hours. It was just this sort of weird period between. There was like the first time where she had a group of friends who I did not know, and I had friends that she didn't know, and it was. I remember it was neat when she would come visit. Like she had landed a part in a music video, but the one that was probably the most memorable was when Heavy D picked her out to be in a video that he filmed in Miami Beach called Girls, Girls, They Love Me. And back in the 90s, way before social media, everybody watched MTV or BET, and the guys would just stay in the lobby and just watch music videos. So when she came to visit me, they knew who she was. Yeah, I remember thinking how weird that was that these guys all came and rushed her for an autograph. It was like I was laughing, like, they're asking you for your autograph? Who do they think you are? But they recognized her from the music video. It was pretty funny. She got a kick out of that. So she was kind of coming into her own world. She had lost a ton of weight. She was tall, but she was always a very hippie person. And so, like I go away for, a semester and I come back and she's, very thin. I remember thinking, oh my God, what happened? But she was really conscious of, she was really sort of taking it seriously. She was taking acting classes and really decided that she was just going to be all in. She wanted to, do as much as she could in the entertainment industry and had talked about moving to Atlanta. I mean, it was a really exciting period.
When Deb found out she was pregnant, Sharon was the first person she told. They shared the pregnancy in countless phone calls. And then, a month before Sharon died, Deb took an unplanned trip to visit her.
And she was just stunned on the phone, like, oh my God, you're going to be a mom. Anyway, she was really excited. So was I. I'd come home to visit her in my 8th month of pregnancy against my doctor's wishes. And I really don't know why. I remember feeling, I don't know, just nervous. Just something, I don't know another way to explain it, something in my spirit didn't seem right. I was really, the closer I got to that delivery day, the more jittery I became. I chalked it up to I was a first-time mom, but something just did not feel right. And I came to visit her in May, and that was the last time that I saw her.
The first days of the investigation of the Casey's Nickelodeon murders stretched into weeks. The FBI had been working on the surveillance video, trying to enhance the quality of the grainy black and white picture. Before leaving Butch's home, one of the intruders removed a shirt that had been draped over his head, exposing his face to the hidden security camera in the living room. A still photograph was made of the image, along with an image of his accomplice, who wore a ball cap and sunglasses. The pictures were sent back to Miramar investigators, and flyers were made. The faces on it were enhanced, but still low quality. The flyers were sent to police departments across Florida. There was no immediate payoff, and police were being tight-lipped about their progress. But some information was starting to leak out to the press. Batinto Batts was reporting for the Sun-Sentinel, and his police sources were slipping him information. They were chasing leads that pointed in 3 different directions.
Then of course, there were rumors about this being a mob hit gone bad because these 2 young women were there. That these were just robberies. That this was just a robbery that had ended up turning violent. That they were really looking to score, and it turned out to be something a little bit more than what they had bargained for.
The information about a possible connection between Butch Casey and the mob was coming from police informants. But that's not all. They also came from Butch himself. $50,000. That's how much Butch Casey owed to the Gambino crime family, at least according to tips that were coming in to police. Some of those tips were from well-established confidential informants. The tipsters told police that Butch had been warned to start paying up. That warning came a few months before his death, along with a beatdown that left him with bruised ribs. If that information was accurate, Butch had enemies. Miramar police detective Ray Black spent weeks interviewing Butch's close friends and relatives and the people he worked with. From a 1995 deposition, quote, "I started to hear a pattern. Sukarski began to make statements to people that implied that perhaps there was something going to happen to him. He also made statements to employees in the bar that he was going to be bigger news than OJ." End quote. Black kept questioning those who knew Butch best. Was he sick? Did he have any terminal disease? Had he mentioned receiving threats? Did he have a gambling problem, a drug problem, money problems? Did he ever mention owing money to a loan shark? Was he involved with mobsters or drug traffickers? But Detective Black got nowhere. Only vague references to Butch's odd behavior shortly before his murder, and maybe even a foreshadowing of what was about to happen, in Butch's own voice. See, Butch Casey wasn't just videotaping his home with hidden security cameras. He also had a habit of recording calls that he made and received on his home phone. He saved the cassette tapes, and police found them. Among the phone conversations they listened to was one with Butch's son, Brian Bond. What they heard was a worried, anxious Butch Casey, and confirmation of possible mob connections. This call was recorded in the days before Butch's murder. The audio quality is poor, but let's hear from Butch in his own voice.
Things have been fierce, very fierce, very, very fierce. Fierce competition.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Oh, you have no idea. So I don't know what's going to happen down here. There's serious shit. Battling with mobsters and all kinds of shit. Fuck.
You?
Yeah.
Oh.
But I got the guy, though.
Yeah?
Yeah, I handle that one. Some serious stuff. Always something. There's never anything dull with me, Brian. You know that? There's never anything dull.
I know that. That I know.
There's never a dull moment. Man, oh man.
He tells his son Brian that he'd been depressed over the arrest of his buddy, O.J. Simpson.
I'm depressed. I'm very depressed.
What?
I'm depressed. My friend O.J. Simpson got got all kinds of screwed up, I was good friends with that guy.
You were?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they wanted me to go on TV and everything. I declined,
Wow.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Depressing, huh? Thanks for the call for Father's Day. I appreciate it.
Hope you had a good day.
I was kind of bummed, I know O.J. was a pretty good fellow, He was kind of a real good friend of mine. He lent me a bunch of money when I needed it, too,
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Real good guy, If you were the superstar of the world, and your wife, the woman that had your children, was going out with a 22-year-old or a 24-year-old guy driving your Ferrari around, would you be pissed off?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'll say no more.
At one point in the conversation, he tells Brian he will be taken care of in Butch's will if anything ever happens to him.
Well, if in case anything ever happens to me, Ray is the executive of my estate, and you're in there for a good allowance, say that. No, I said if anything ever happens to me.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not saying that anything is going to, but just in case,
23 years later, Brian Bond remembers thinking that something sounded off with his father during that phone call.
He sounded tense, I'll put it that way. He sounded a little uptight. He asked me if I could come down or if I would think about coming down to help out and I guess work with him in the restaurant. He said a few things. He just said, "Yeah, things are getting fierce down here. Things are getting a little he used the word fierce. I don't remember what else he used, but it was almost like a foreshadowing of something bad coming down the pike. I felt the need that he was reaching out, or at least giving me kind of a subversive message that something wasn't good or something wasn't right. So he must have known. He must have known something was not right with the world at that point.
Brian Bond had only known his dad, Butch Casey, for about 10 years. He was the product of a high school romance that the 18-year-old Butch had with Brian's mother. The teenagers were never together, and Butch was not part of Brian's childhood.
Yeah, I actually had my first phone conversations with him probably in the mid-'80s. I lived with my mother at the time, and, we talked a bit about it, just mentioning that I wanted to meet him at some point. I was busy with my life. I was in college. It wasn't a good timing. She said, well, why don't you talk to him on the phone? So I ended up having some, quite a few phone conversations, and that went well. He seemed receptive to me and my existence as his son. We talked a little bit about how things turned out, and in any case, so we had talked on the phone, and we tried to make some future plans to meet up at some point when it made sense. And so it really didn't happen until 1987, so I was finished with college. He really had, from what I could tell, no reservations in getting to know me, what I was doing, what I was up to, what I wanted to do in the future. As a son, that actually made me feel pretty good. I should say, I don't want to use the term long lost, but a son that hadn't been there with him.
Finally, Brian Bond had met his father. The two talked often on the phone. Brian grew to like Butch Casey. He was a good guy, Brian thought, fun-loving, with a great sense of humor. And Butch seemed to like having his son in his life.
He would I'd be getting ready for work, and since the restaurant bar had an all-night license, I'd get a phone call at around 6 in the morning, and it would be him, and he'd say, hey, what's going on? How you doing? I'm just kind of packing up, locking up the place. I wanted to give you a call. I was thinking about you. That kind of made me feel good, he wanted to get to talk with me and get to know me a little better. So that was nice. So we made a plan. I said, well, I'd like to come down for a little longer and meet up, with my grandmother. And she was a sweetheart. That was Dottie. She was something. She was special. It was a year or two later. It was 88 or 89. And I came down. I stayed with him for a few days. We had a good time. We had a nice time. It was, I guess you'd call it a bonding experience. He really had a different life, though, because of the restaurant and the hours that the restaurant was open, with the all-night license. So he really kind of had this sort of vampire-ish sort of existence where he would sleep well, all morning, basically, then get moving in the afternoon. And then we'd go over to the restaurant in the afternoon and do that into the night, And I never saw a man work a room like this guy. He would walk around the bar. He would stop and talk to everyone, and not just stop. Have a conversation. Just very engaging. He'd put his arm around people. He would be smiling and talking. He'd always have a couple of one-liners, some jokes, and what have you. And I think he just really made people feel at home in his place, in his element. I never saw a man so engaged with people before. It was a sight to see, really.
Then, in 1994, just a few days after he last talked to Butch, Brian caught a Buffalo newscast.
Came home one night and turned on the TV, and there was a news brief, a news blurb, and there he was. His face was on the television, and they had stated that he was, he had been killed in a home invasion. That was shocking, to say the least. It was, yeah.
The news brings Brian Bond back to the last conversation he had with Butch. In the phone call, Butch asked his son to come down to Florida to help run the bar, Casey's Nickelodeon.
Pressure's on, Donnie. I think you got my side. I do. I don't want you with machine guns in hand, but, not that intense.
I don't want you with machine guns in hand, Butch said. It's not that intense. Butch couldn't have been more wrong. Just a few days after that call, Butch, Sharon, and Marie were shot in their heads by a man with a machine gun. 3 weeks after the murders, police were still examining the most important piece of evidence they had, the surveillance video. Then they catch their second big break, one that takes their attention away from the mob hit theory. Miles south of Butch Casey's home in Broward County, police in the southern part of Miami-Dade County are responding to a call from a home invasion robbery. It's a brutal attack. Officers nab 3 suspects and haul them into the station. They are Pablo Ibar, Alberto Rincon, and Alex Hernandez. All 3 live in Broward County. 1, and maybe 2 of them, resemble the guys on the flyer that Miramar police had distributed after the Casey's Nickelodeon murders. On July 15th, 3 weeks after the Miramar murders, Detective Roy Black gets a call from cops in Dade County. You should at least come take a look at these guys, they say. Black isn't optimistic, but he has to run down every lead, so he heads south. He questions one of the 3 men police have in custody. Black shows Alberto Rincon the enhanced photo of the Casey's killers, but doesn't mention the Miramar murders. He testifies later that Rincon pointed to the photo of the suspect who had exposed his face at the end of the Butch Casey security footage. "Is that Pablo?" Rincon asks. Detective Black said he shot back, "Well, who does it look like?" Pablo Ibar. Not long after the exchange, Detective Black runs into Pablo Ibar in a station hallway. He's being escorted to an interview room. Black's eyes pop. That's the guy, he thinks. The guy who took the shirt off. He calls the other detectives working the case and tells them to drive to Dade County immediately. He's face to face with their first official suspect. On the next episode of Felonious Florida, the Casey's Nickelodeon murders. The vicious home invasion in Miami-Dade County leads to even more breaks in the investigation of the Casey's murders. More suspects emerge, and details of their activities help detectives stack up a mountain of evidence. But as the first murder trial gets underway, cracks are exposed that threaten to undo the whole case. Thanks for listening to this episode of Felonious Florida. If you're enjoying the podcast, please rate us on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about our show. It's available at feloniousflorida.com, Apple Podcasts, Wondery.com, or your favorite podcast platform. You can go online to see photographs, video, and read more about the cases we're featuring at feloniousflorida.com, and be sure to like us on Facebook. Felonious Florida is produced by David Schutz, Lisa Arthur, and Juan Ortega. Casey's Nickelodeon Murders is reported and written by your host, me, Lisa Arthur. Editing by David Schutz and Randy Rogoski. Sound engineering and production by Cindy Choi, Carlene Jean, and Sean Pitts. The Felonious Florida team includes Danny Sanchez, Dana Banker, and David Selig. Hi, this is Lisa Arthur. If you'd like to support more journalism like this, you can help by joining the Sun Sentinel, South Florida's leading source for news, information, and entertainment. Visit sunsentinel.com/join.